Hey guys, and welcome to a Cloud Developer channel. In the last video, I showed you how to create a new Angular application. We walked through the folder structure as well as we went over some of the basics of how to perform testing. In today's video, I want to show you the next step of being able to start to modify your application. And the first thing that I wanted to do was I want to be able to start using a CSS and a JavaScript framework that allows me to make the website look better and allow me to do layout of the application much simpler than having to do everything from scratch. So I've looked at different couple of frameworks that are available. There are things like Bootstrap CSS, there's Blueprint CSS frameworks, and there's another popular framework called Semantic UI. And looking at all the different options that are available and seeing how many people are actually using it and how involved the community is, I actually liked what they were offering. And the other thing is you can pretty much see every single site out there is actually using Bootstrap CSS, and they are all looking the same. So I wanted to choose something that I can actually enjoy learning about as well. So looking at this framework, the Semantic UI framework, it comes with some good documentation. It has good examples. And the other thing that was important for me is also being able to have some of the out-of-the-box components, because I didn't want to actually have to build everything from scratch either. So when you go to semantic-ui.com, you get to this website and you can go to the Get Started page, and it will talk you through a couple of things that you would need to know about how to set it up, depending on the kind of framework or application framework you're using. Now, the one thing to note is this does not come with built-in support with Angular framework itself, and so we're going to have to actually do some things to actually get it integrated, and it's not going to be as nice of an experience as you would get most likely with using something like React or Material framework, but it's actually not that difficult to get it up and running, and it gives us the basics we need to actually build a pretty good looking website. So this is where you can go in and also see the different examples of the different components it has available. You can download it, but we won't actually need to download it from here because it's all available through npm package manager, and we can actually install it. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I have here is I actually have our application that we built last time. It's running right here, and I've started up using ngserve, and I'm going to go ahead and stop this here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'll open up this folder, and I'll open this up with Visual Studio Code, and this is our basic application. So the first thing we want to do is we actually want to go ahead and install the Semantic UI framework. Now to do that, you have to actually go to the folder where your project is, and I'm already inside of the Cloud Developer source folder. That's where the code is stored. If I just list the files, you can see that I'm actually in the same folder, and it's actually right here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to go ahead and install that Semantic UI framework, and you do that by typing in npm install semantic UI-css. Now you can actually install semantic-ui, and it will actually download a different package for you that allows you to make some adjustments to the actual Semantic UI framework. So for example, if you don't want to use the default grid layout of 16 columns, you want to adjust those settings, you can actually go ahead and install the Semantic UI package itself, and you can use gulp as the actual method of being able to build and compile a new version of the CSS and JavaScript final libraries that you can then use in your application. But in this case, I'm actually going to be using the out-of-the-box already pre-compiled, pre-built package, and I don't actually need to make any adjustments to it, or at least not at this point. So I'll go ahead and actually install the semantic-ui-css, which will give me the compiled versions of the the JavaScript as well as the CSS components. So, and I'll do -- save, and what this will do is automatically include it in my project as a dependency. So let's let this run real quick, and then we'll go ahead and actually show you how to configure it inside of the project itself so that your application can begin using it. So now that the library is actually downloaded, the next step we want to do is we want to tell our application to start being able to actually use it and include it inside of the actual build process. So you do that by going to .angular.cli JSON file, and in here there is a styles section. So what we want to do is we actually want to add that reference to the CSS file. Now, where is it actually placed, our Semantic UI framework? And it's actually under the nodes_modules. So if you go in here and we'll search for Semantic, and what we're looking for is the Semantic UI. And in here you can see that there is the semantic.css as well as semantic.min.css, and that's the one we're going to be using. So to do this, you'll just simply add /node modules, Semantic UI CSS, and then we'll put a comma here, and we'll go ahead and save it. And what I want to show you real quick is, if you notice here, the look of this application is nothing special, but you'll notice as soon as I actually start it up, it will change the look and feel slightly here. So let me go ahead and actually start this up. Okay, so it started up successfully, and I'll go ahead and refresh the page. And you'll notice that the actual color scheme of the hyperlinks actually changed. But now we know that the actual semantic library has loaded, and we're able to start using the CSS styles. Another way you can actually see if it actually loaded appropriately is if I go to the dev toolbar and I'll open up the styles bundle, I should be able to actually see a reference to semantic. And you can see that it's actually referenced right here, so semantic.min.css. So, but we don't need to worry about this anymore. And the next step I want to actually do is I want to start changing the actual homepage, or my index page. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the component, the main component of our application, which renders that page. And it can be found under app, and under the app folder we have a couple of files here. So app.component.css, which contains our CSS. We have the app component HTML, as well as the app component itself, which is the actual JavaScript or TypeScript file that produces the JavaScript for our application. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to go into the app component HTML, and we'll go ahead and delete this. And as soon as I save this and I'll go back to the web browser, you can see that now everything is blank. So what I want to do next is I want to actually start building my application. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start building the main menu, or the menu that's going to show at the top of the page. And I'm going to be copying and pasting some code here to make it go a little bit quicker. But I'll explain the different aspects of the elements I'm putting in here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And the first thing you'll see is I am putting in a div with a class. There's a couple classes that are listed here. The first one is going to be the UI class that actually tells our application to start using the Semantic UI framework. It's saying that it's going to be fixed at the top. Inverted basically makes it so that it's visible, and it will give it a dark color, and you'll notice that in a moment. And we're telling it that it's going to be a menu. The next item is we're going to be adding a div with a class of UI and container, and this is a notion in Semantic of being able to say I have content inside of a particular element, and make this object or element, an actual container. And then we're going to put in a link, and this link is actually going to be kind of our main application link with an image. So I'm going to be referencing an asset images logo PNG. That's a logo that I created under the assets folder, images, and then here's that logo. And next to it, I'm going to have a text that says clouddeveloper.io. And the next item, and I'll show you this as well, we're putting in two additional links. The first one is going to actually be the home button link, and then there's going to be the about button. Now, a couple of things to note about this. If you notice, all of the links actually have an item next to it. And this is how it actually tells you that it's a menu item essentially. This one has a logo class. And the home and the about buttons have active and write. Active means that it's currently the menu item that's actually selected and actually highlighted. And the class of write actually tells it to reposition the about button to the right. So if I go ahead and save this and go back to the application, you'll notice that we now actually have the clouddeveloper.io listed here. And if we hover over it, it looks like an actual menu item. And if we click it, it'll actually reload the page because we have the slash as the actual href. And then for the home, since we have the pound sign, it doesn't actually take us anywhere. And the about button also doesn't take us anywhere. But this is our basic menu structure that we wanted to set up and start with. The next item we want to actually take a look at is we're going to style it a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and paste some CSS content into the app component CSS. And what this does is it will actually tell our logo to have a margin. It's going to give a margin to the actual container itself on the main homepage. And we're going to also add a footer as well. And you'll see that it's actually going to position the footer on the bottom. I'll go ahead and save this. And if once we refreshed, you can actually see that it added a little bit of space and some padding around this home page or the actual toolbar itself or the menu. So the next step I want to take is I'm going to go ahead and build a footer. And in the footer, what I want to do here is I'm going to just go ahead and add it to the bottom. And what we're going to start off with is we're going to put in a div. And we're going to go ahead and close that div. And this div basically will create a black area on the bottom. So you'll notice that now we have this section on the bottom that represents the footer. And as we resize the window, you'll actually notice that the toolbar matches that content area. And the next item we want to do is we're going to put another div in here. And that div is going to contain some copyright text that I'm going to add here. So I'll go ahead and close this div. When I save this, nothing changes because we want to actually add the content. So the content I'm going to go ahead and add here is just going to be a basic copyright statement with my name in it. And some additional formatting. So you can see I have the copyright symbol, I have the copyright statement, and Cloud Developer, and all rights reserved. Once it's saved, you can actually go ahead and reload, and you'll notice that it puts it in the center. So that is our footer, and that's how simple it is to be able to basically create this kind of a layout. Now, outside of us using a couple of CSS classes such as the menu, inverted, fixed, container, header, and item, we're not really doing anything special. Basically, this is just plain old HTML with some CSS formatting. Now, the next item that I'm going to show you is we're going to actually add some content, and this is where it's going to get a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting a section that has a class of UI main text container. Now you notice that again we have the class container in here, but we also have text, and this is an indicator that we actually are going to have some text in this application or in this page that we're going to display to the user. And when we go back to the site, we don't actually see anything here because we want to actually add the text itself. So the next step is we'll go ahead and add the header tag in order to be able to display just some basic welcome to a clouddeveloper.io channel information. And if I go back here, you can actually see that that text showed up. Now, if you remember in a prior video, we actually had a specific directive or a template variable that was being passed in. So we'll go ahead and add that here. Because this is a view or a component in Angular, we should be able to use the title, which is actually in the app component here defined, and it has a value of clouddeveloper.io. And since we put it here, and I'll go ahead and save and go back to the page, you can see it actually rendered the same exact content as if I hard-coded it. But now if I decide to read it from a database or another location, it will automatically change it to whatever the value is. So the next item I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in a paragraph tag here just to state that there's some content that's going to be coming soon. And it refreshes and puts it in here. And you can see that it's organizing it pretty nicely for me. And this is where the benefit of the semantic and other CSS layout frameworks and libraries come in. So what we want to start doing is we want to start using a grid system. And what a grid system is, it's a way for us to be able to put content on the page without really focusing too much attention on how do you specify the width, the location, as people actually start resizing your browser. What do you need to do in order to handle all of those resize type of events and conditions? Because this grid system actually helps you figure all of that out and to do different columns, which means width of the content, and rows, which means you can actually stack content one after the other. So in this case, what I am doing here is I'm adding a div with a class of UI grid, which basically allows me to start doing things like defining basically the area of where I want to start creating those columns and rows. So I go ahead and do that here. And what I'm going to do is add my first column area. Now this column area is basically defined with an 8 wide and a column classes. 8 represents 8 columns. Wide says that go ahead and make it 8 columns wide. And column indicates that this is a column. So anything that goes in this section essentially is going to be part of that column. So the next item that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div tag here. And that div tag is going to contain some text to display to the end user. And all it is basically it's a div tag with a UI, a class of header, which basically would be the same thing as I'm defining an H1 or H2 tags. And then because I'm defining it with a class of small, it's actually going to make the text smaller than what a typical H1 or H2 tag would be. And I'm putting text column 1 in here. So if I go ahead and save this and refresh, you can see that the text column 1 showed up. Now let's go ahead and actually add a second column here. And the text in that is going to be column 2. Let me format that real quick. And now that I have that, I'll save it. You'll notice that the second column showed up and it's offset. But the thing is, you can't really see and you can't really tell, how wide these things are. So one thing just to show you real quick, I can go ahead and give it a style and background color. Make it gray. And what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and add the background color to the other one, and I'll make it light gray. When I refresh, you'll notice that one column is much wider than the other one. Now imagine if I wanted to make the other column, let's say 6 columns instead of the 3 columns that I have here. So I'll just change it to 6, save it, and you'll notice that it actually changed. So that's pretty much how simple it is to use these kind of grid frameworks, and they become very handy for you as you add content to your application. That you don't have to worry about resizing things or defining how everything looks. As you can see, when I'm actually changing the size of my content, it begins to actually adjust the layout on the page for me, and I didn't have to do anything. So hopefully this showed you a little bit of the Semantic UI framework, and shows you the benefits of being able to use a framework like this, because it becomes very easy to actually build your applications without having to start from scratch and learning and knowing everything about CSS and the different nuances of different browsers and different conditions you have to meet in order to make the application look professional, without spending many hours. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and leave your feedback in the comment section. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be talking about in the future videos of how do you actually start building on top of this framework to be able to extend your application. So hopefully enjoyed this content, and I'll talk to you soon.